My name is Tracy Seacombe. What I want to share with you today is that there is only fear that stands between you and what you want. So let's delve into this. The first thing that I really want to point out to you that if you're going to actually make a shift and really benefit from this training, it's important that you put this training into action. So sometimes it's very tempting for us to enjoy a training session, think that it's really interesting information, but then we don't actually do the exercises that we are taught. But of course, everything comes from the actions that you take. So I encourage you to take notes. This training will be recorded, so if you miss anything and you want to go back and listen to it again, you can. But absolutely, when you are playing the recording back, if you can pause it and take down some notes that are relevant to you. Because what you want to do from this training is identify the fears that you have and then use the exercises that I'll go through so that you can release those fears and allow you to be able to go forward. So first of all, I just want to share the story that you may have heard called The Master and the Dogs. So there was a very wise master and he was taking a walk, and with him he had one of the junior monks. And as they were walking along, they came across some dogs, some very fierce-looking dogs, up a couple of them. And the master said to the monk, "Don't worry, they are chained up, so you're completely safe." As they continued on their walk down the trail, they turned back and realised that the dogs had actually broken free from their chains and were chasing after them. So the monk was in fear, but what the master did was turn around, face the dogs and ran straight towards them. And of course the dogs were so confused by this behaviour that they just stopped in their tracks, stopped barking at them and stopped chasing them. So a very good analogy when we start to think about our fears. I would like to thank and recognise Robin Sharma, who has put together the 12 core human fears. And I'd also like to acknowledge my coach Andrew Ross Roberts, who delivered this training to me last week. And the best way for you to learn something and implement it into your life is to teach it to somebody else. So let's go through these 12 core fears, human fears. The first one is fear of failure. Now, this is the thing that stops us, and this is really what happens with fear. If you're afraid of something, it stops you from taking action. What if I fail? So this is a deep core fear that many of us have, and we've not only inherited it, but all of these fears come from the way our brains are wired, because of course the development of the brain happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago when there were real things to be afraid of. You know, we really needed to protect our livelihood, to even protect ourselves to stay alive from real fear. So there, of course, is an importance to fear that actually keeps us alive. But this fear of failure is actually stopping us from taking those steps forward to actually do what we want in our businesses. So really identify whether you can relate to this and whether you are afraid of failing. Why are we afraid of failing? What will it look like if we fail? And some of the answers to that may come back to, well, people will think I'm a failure. You know, I won't look good. People, you know, won't respect me if I fail. I will feel bad about myself if I fail. But the thing is, about anyone who has actually experienced success, they have all experienced failure as well. Because if you're going to take a risk so that you can succeed, there is always the risk of failure. And in fact, we fail forward fast, because we need to try things and they may not work out, and we're either winning or we're learning. So as we take these steps forward, if it doesn't work out, then we're going to learn from it, we're going to adjust, and then we're going to take the step again in a slightly different way. The second fear is actually fear of success. And this might sound really strange. You might think, why would I be afraid of success? But this is very, very common. I'll share a personal experience of my own. When I was quite young, in about year 9 at school. I grew up in Port Lincoln, and I have a vivid memory of sitting on a seat overlooking the Oval at the Port Lincoln High School, and from the school you could actually see our home. My father had worked very hard and created great success, and we had a beautiful home that you could see from the school. So a girl walked up to me at school, punched me in the face and said, "Rich bitch." And as you can imagine, it hurt and tears came to my eyes, and I was terrified. I was frozen. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I absolutely didn't fight back. But I learned in that instance that it hurts to be successful. So thanks to my dad and all of his hard work and the fact that he created this success, I was actually being punished for that success. So we can hold on to these false ideas where we think that we actually won't be liked if we're successful. You may have also grown up with an idea that money is bad, and money is not bad or good. Money is money. So there are often these really unqualified beliefs that we hold on to that can make us fear success. Fear of rejection. Often we don't ask for what we want because we fear that we'll be rejected. We won't pick up the phone and share with somebody something that we know could potentially change their life because we think they're going to reject us. The really important distinction to make is that when people say no to an opportunity, they are not saying no to you. They're saying no to the opportunity. The opportunity is not for them. But it's not actually a personal rejection. So it's really important to firstly identify whether you have this fear of rejection, so that you then know what to do with it. The next one is extremely common, and that is the one of a fear of not being good enough. Sometimes we can look at all the people around us and think that they're better than us. We look at somebody who is succeeding in business and say, well, it's okay for them because they're a really good public speaker, or they're really intelligent, or they went to university and got a degree, or they've been in business before. And we have all of these reasons why other people are better than us and we're not as good as them. And you know, that person that you're thinking of often will have this same fear that you do. So many people have this fear of not being good enough. And again, this can trace back to our childhood. And this tracing back to the childhood is never about blaming our parents. Our parents absolutely always did the absolute best that they could. And they were just really mimicking what they'd learned when they were growing up. So when we're growing up, we may, for example, try something and then we're told by a teacher or our peers that it's not good enough. And that stays with us, and we take it into our adulthood lives, and we continue to think we're not good enough, or we're not smart enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not confident enough, all of these different things. And if this is how you're feeling, holding you back. So really identify with this and see whether this may be an underlying fear that you have as well. Fear of not having enough. So this is a real scarcity mentality, and this is really going to impact on the message that you put out to the world. So if you're in business, you want to absolutely over-deliver. So if you make a promise to your prospect, to your customer, you want to always over-deliver. But if you're afraid of losing money, or if you're afraid of not having enough, then you're always going to be scarce. You're always going to scrimp and not quite deliver on the value that you've promised. And we're always rewarded for value. So you are going to be rewarded very handsomely if you just deliver great value. Always over-deliver on your promises. And this has to come from an abundance attitude. So it's moving away from competition and realizing that there is always enough. So this includes letting go of jealousy. You know, if you look at somebody else who is doing well and you resent them for that and you feel jealous for that and you start to make all these excuses about why they're doing well, you know, say that they're cheating, for example, or they've been given extra help, rather than being happy for them. And if you're truly happy for them, it actually comes from a place of abundance mentality. And, you know, often we'll say, well, it's okay for the millionaire. Of course they feel abundant. But that millionaire had that feeling of abundance before they became the millionaire. So you really need to start with that mentality of abundance to attract abundance. Fear of looking different. This is a big one. Sometimes we just want to conform and fit in. And I have to tell you that this is impossible if you want to be authentic and you truly want to be happy. Happiness comes from being who you really are. And you are wonderful just the way you are. You are unique. You have this whole set of characteristics and personality and gifts that are unique to you. And so true happiness and peace is going to come from embracing those. I always teach my family, my children, that being weird is good. And that's because your weirdness is you and it's who you are. And of course you are different. But if you just want to conform, go along with the crowd, just fit in, then you're not going to express who you really are and express those gifts that you have to give the world. If you want to make a great impact on the world, then embrace who you are and don't be afraid of looking different. I just love this. I was told once, you are not for everyone. And the sooner you realize that, the more comfortable you're in your own skin. There are plenty of people out there who are going to love you, love your message, love what you have to offer. But if you're always trying to fit in and always trying to please other people, it's never going to work because we're all different. There is a tribe of people who are your tribe. They want what you have. They want you and the way you deliver it. So be you and be unique. Don't try to copy somebody else. Don't try to impress anyone, and certainly don't be concerned about what other people think of you. This is the one big thing that stops you from following your dreams, is to really be concerned about what another person thinks of you. You be a good person based on your values. You know what's right for you. Fear of losing control. Sometimes we really resist change because we absolutely feel safe if we're in control. And now I've got a picture here of a very organised pantry, and I just aspire to that, and I'm certainly not being critical of somebody who has a pantry that looks like this. I just wanted to express that concept of control. So control is about thinking that you know exactly how you're going to create your success. Sometimes you need to surrender the how. Get really focused on the what that you want. Get really focused on the why and the impact that it's going to have on the bigger community and particularly your customer. But just let go of that how, because when we're really fearful of losing control, we're actually fearful of change. And if you're going to change your results and get more of what you want in your life, you are going to have to change, but you're going to change in positive ways that are just going to expand you. You're going to grow and become a better and better version of your unique self. So it's really important to really let go of this fear of losing that control. Fear of being alone. This is a big one for some people. Sometimes we don't like being on our own. So we're continually looking for fulfillment from outside of us. So if we are in the house on our own, we'll get on Facebook, because then we're not really on our own. We're actually communicating with other people by liking their posts, by posting something and then getting comments. So we're really not going within and actually spending time with ourselves. It's really, really important to set aside time every single day where you tap into that higher power that you have within yourself and really listen to that inner voice who is truly you, and take guidance from that. Always looking for answers outside. That emptiness that we can feel inside can't be filled up by things. It's absolutely nothing wrong with having money, nice cars, nice clothes, nice houses, nothing wrong with all of those things. but they won't fill up that emptiness inside of you unless you actually fill it up with what's most important, and that is knowing who you really are and developing a great friendship with yourself. So get to know yourself and set aside time to actually be alone and really question this. Am I afraid of being alone? Do I ever spend time where I'm truly alone, or am I always tapping in to something or someone outside of myself? Fear of illness. Now, you may or may not be in this category, but just ask yourself about this and just look back and see if there was a history of this when you were growing up. Did you have a parent who had a fear of illness? And maybe you're in an environment at work, for example, if you're in the health industry, where you're surrounded by illness. You know, sometimes ignorance is bliss. When you know so much about all of the things that could go wrong with your health, it can really create that fear. So just tap into yourself and see whether, you know, you've got a habit of always being sick and whether it actually traces back to this fear of illness. Fear of being exposed as a fraud. You know, there are plenty of successful people out there that every time they step onto the stage, they are just hoping that nobody will expose them, because deep down, they still feel like they're not good enough. They still feel like perhaps their success is just all going to be gone in a heartbeat. One day someone will realise they're just not as good as everybody thinks that they are. So sometimes this really holds us back. We're really afraid that we're just not as good or as successful as people think that we are. And so we're faking it in some levels. And, you know, we all have this little insecurity inside where we just don't feel as confident as perhaps we portray to everybody else. So just becoming aware of this and really, you know, understanding it, we can make this shift with the techniques that I'll show you. Fear of love. So this is one that you would think, why would I be afraid of love? And not everybody has this, but you'll see this sometimes, and you might see this in yourself, where in a relationship, somebody actually rejects the other person before the other person can reject them. And this is a fear. This is a fear that this is too good to be true. Once they get to know me, they'll realise that I'm not as good as they thought I was. You know, it's closely linked to that fear of being exposed, because so far you've shown up being exactly what they want you to be, but you just think, I'm not good enough, and so at some point they're going to leave me. So I'm going to reject them first so I can never get hurt. So the fear of love is very, very close to the fear of being hurt. So just see whether this is something that you can identify with. And number 12 is the fear of being insignificant. You know, that fear of never really doing anything that actually matters, never doing anything that has an impact on the rest of the world. And, you know, we really do want to make a difference. We do want to do something that's important. And, you know, this ties really closely into being yourself and being truthful with yourself, following your heart, and really speaking your truth. So let me introduce you the 7 tools that cure fear. These have been developed by Andrew Ross Roberts, and they are very, very simple, but it's important to apply them. So the tools sitting in the toolbox won't do anything. It's really important that you get them out and use them to make a difference in your life. So number 1 is to know your fears. So what I want you to do when you go back to this is pause here, go through the list of 12 and identify which one of them you have on some, maybe stronger than others. Some you may not have, but all of you are going to have at least some of these core fears. So you really want to sit with the fear and really have a look at the trigger of the fear. So, for example, if you are afraid of not having enough, so this is the scarcity fear, what triggers that? Is it triggered by a big unexpected bill coming in? Do you suddenly get a knot in your stomach and think, oh, how am I going to pay for that? Or if business is going well and then all of a sudden there's a dip in your business and you think, oh no, maybe it's all going to go downhill from here. And just notice what happens when you actually have that fear. Write down, what is it costing you, this fear? So every time you feel this fear, what is your reaction to that fear, and what is that costing you? And what would be the benefit if you were actually to release that fear? How would your life change if you let go of that fear? Number 2 is to actually validate the fear. Sometimes we just want to run away, like when the dog story, the monk wanted to run away from those fierce dogs. Sometimes we need to actually validate that fear and say, okay, I accept it. I actually bring this out in the open. I accept that I have this fear, and really validate it and become aware of how it affects your body. So if you have that fear of scarcity, what does that feel like? Do you get a tightness in your chest? Do you get a sort of nervous, sick feeling in your stomach? Do you start to clench your fists? Do you hold your jaw tight? What is it that you do when you feel that fear? So really validate the fear by acknowledging it, thanking it, and just feeling it to start with. Number 3 is to put a voice to your fear. So this is where you have a conversation. Now, it's important to find somebody who is going to be a good listener and has a positive attitude. What you don't want to do is to team up with someone to talk about your fears, where it just ends up to be a complete complaining session. So instead, you're going to share a fear and really talk through it. You know, just be honest with them, someone that you can trust, and say, I really do have a fear of this, and just talk it through. Talk about ways that you could actually look at this differently. You could actually question the fear and say, you know, well, do I really have to fear that anymore? Does it make sense for me to fear it? Why have I always feared that? And really start to have a conversation around it. This is a great exercise, and I've done this recently, which has had a fantastic effect on me. And this is where you actually write a letter to your fear. So you choose the fear. You might want to do this with several of the 12 fears, depending on which feel very, very strong for you. And you start by saying, dear fear of being alone. And then you start to write to this fear, thanking it to begin with. I know that you are there because you want to protect me, but I'm releasing you now. I don't need you anymore because I understand that as an adult, I really don't need this fear, and I'm able to move forward. And just write the letter, send the fear love, release the fear, and really talk about what your life is going to look like now that you've released that fear. And end it with a statement that really is telling you what your life looks like now that you don't have that fear. So a really positive I am statement that shows this fear that you can have the life that you want when you don't hold on to that fear anymore. And number 5 is to run towards your fear. So you've all heard the statement, feel the fear and do it anyway. So let's say, for example, you have a fear of meeting people, and you're about to go into a party, you only know a few people there, and you're going to be meeting a lot of new people that you haven't met before. So just before you go into the party, you feel anxious, and you kind of think about what is it that you're imagining? What's the little visualization that's coming up for you when you feel that fear? Are you imagining yourself being introduced to someone and you do something stupid, like you just put food in your mouth as the introduction happens? Or you go to shake hands and you end up, you know, stepping forward too far and you kind of bump into them. Or you say something really inappropriate because you can't think of the right thing to say. What's the worst thing that can happen? What are the things that you think might happen? And after a while, it just loses its power. It actually becomes quite comical because you realise that even if those things did happen, it's actually not that bad. You know, the other person is really not going to judge you to the level that you're judging yourself. And then go in and present yourself and take the action. And 9 times out of 10, you're just going to think, that just wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So really have a go at running towards your fear. The next step is to tell yourself new stories. And to tell yourself new stories, you really need to tap into the story that you've been telling yourself so far. So let's say, for example, you've always told yourself this story that other people are successful and I'm always trying. Just reassess that story. What if you could change that? What if you could change it to the fact that I am successful? Because if I look back to 10 years ago, I have changed since then, and these are the ways that I've grown. And I know that I will continue to grow, and that even though it's great to look towards that success, I absolutely love the process. I love the people that I've met along the way. I love the skills that I've learned. You know, I enjoy what I do. And really celebrate yourself and tell a different story. But to do this, you really need to be honest with yourself about the story that you're already telling yourself. So really write this out and tell yourself a new story. And finally, number 7, do you know you cannot feel love and fear at the same time? Love is the polar opposite to fear. So when you're feeling love, you cannot feel fear. So this is why it's so important to have daily rituals that puts you into the energy of love. Now, gratitude is very, very high to that love emotion. Every morning when you wake up, feel grateful. Feel grateful for what you have right now. If you start to dip in confidence throughout the day, bring yourself back to that gratitude list. It's so powerful to be in a space of gratitude. If somebody says something to you and it offends you, then stop. And in that split second, think, how could I feel love in this instance? How could I look at that comment differently and actually feel and come from a space of love? So we have choices all the time. We can either respond in fear or we can respond with love. Because success is just the outcome of lots and lots of little choices that we make throughout the day. And often those choices just start with the way that we think, the thought we choose to think, and then the feeling that comes with that thought. Tracking our thoughts can be really difficult, but we can respond to how we're feeling. So tap into your feelings. What are your feelings telling you right now? When you feel great, then your thoughts are in love and they're serving you. And when you feel anything less but great, then your thoughts are steering towards fear. So really take time to actually put this information into action so that you can shift these fears one at a time. Write out your top 3 to begin with, and step by step go through these 7 steps and apply each step to each fear that you have. So I hope that you've enjoyed this training. I hope that you can shift those fears that are holding you back. You are amazing. You are unique. You can create the life of your dreams. Just make the decision to do it and start applying this information to your life now so that you can spend more time in love and less time in fear.